This is called the Desire for Transformative Education. And I'd like to begin by talking about this word desire. Um, it, oh, let me just adjust my screen a little bit here. Um, Desire versus the word need, because as I was framing this, I was thinking about the need for transformative education. But what does that word really mean? What do people really need from school? And um, they need to get ahead. They need to acquire the right skills. They need to ensure their own survival. So I think when people focus too much on needs, education becomes smaller than it should be. It becomes really utilitarian and mechanical. End up teaching children how to crunch numbers and form paragraphs and generally become employable in the world. Whereas desire is something different. It comes from something deep inside us that doesn't really care so much what the world wants from us. It cares what we want from the world. And that could mean money and property, but it could also mean something more like justice or creative opportunity or a society that reflects our ideals, beauty, challenge, excitement. The list kind of goes on and on. And for some of us, it means transformation. And it's that desire that makes transformation possible. When someone feels that desire very deeply, it becomes a need. And that's why I settled on this title, because essentially where I am in my life now and how I got here is based on that desire. This is what happened to me. I consider myself a very intellectually curious person, and that was my primary motivation when I was in school. For many years, school really failed to live up to that hope of really engaging my intellect, and part of part of it was because of the lack of real intellectual content, but it went deeper than that. At some point, I understood intuitively that just exercising the mind was not going to show me what I really wanted to know, um, which was related more to a sense of purpose. What is the purpose of life? And more specifically, what is the purpose of my life? School in general did not seem the least interested in that kind of question. And now and then a particular teacher or a class might start to ask those questions, and those became very memorable experiences for me. But most of school was preoccupied with those intellectual skills, reasoning, analysis, persuasion, memory. So when I finally graduated from one of the most prestigious colleges in the world, with so many opportunities before me, I actually felt empty, achingly, despairingly empty. I felt afraid that if I simply followed the path that I saw other people with similar backgrounds to mine taking, that this emptiness would become the foundation of my entire life. So instead of doing that, I left. I drove away from all my family and friends, and I began to explore every community that I could find that seemed to offer something different. And it was 10 years altogether before I began to pursue a more recognizable career after many, many experiences that I would describe as transformative. And those transformative experiences were essentially experiences that related to my identity and my beliefs about life. I think most of us have these experiences. They come through dramatic changes in our lives, like becoming a parent or a religious conversion, or moments of grief and loss that we confront. And these can cause us to revise our sense of who we are and what matters. But more recently, I've come across some research around experiences of awe. When people feel themselves opened up to a grand awareness of connection to something beyond themselves. These kinds of experiences are not easy to engineer for people. And this is where desire comes in. Occasionally, life will force us to confront big mysteries, like with the death of a loved one, but most of the time we have to seek them out. And the purpose of transformative education is to encourage people to seek them out. So let me talk through, well, first some different terms that we use to describe education. Our nomenclature around types of education doesn't really follow much a very particular logic or comprehensive description. We have these two general strands that we like to talk about that we call traditional and progressive. However, traditional doesn't really give us much meaning. It basically refers to anything that's not progressive. And progressive is itself a pretty slippery term. I was surprised to learn that the people who designed the factory-like settings of early public schools would actually have called themselves progressives. Their interest was social progress, systems that would draw every individual into this predictable, efficient organization that would allow society to move forward. And then, of course, there are many other terms. Holistic, like this discussion group, experiential, project-based, integrated. And I think these terms are more helpful because they describe what they actually do, and they give a philosophical emphasis to particular practices in education. But I think of transformative as different from these terms. Not because it looks different in practice. I actually think all of these elements are contained in a transformative approach when it's done in the best way. But transformative describes a purpose, an outcome. That's what most people are concerned about in education. What is the outcome? What does it produce? I belong to a small group of educators out here called the Transformative Education Network. And we set out to define that outcome. What is it that we mean when we talk about this? And it's, of course, very huge and abstract, but only with some definition of what we're talking about can we really expect to bring about the kinds of schools we're seeking. So I'm going to take you through that definition slowly. It's fairly long and involved. And first of all, who does this approach serve? It's an approach to teaching, but it doesn't just serve people. It's also the cultures and the systems that people have created, which in turn influence the kind of education that they offer. So for this approach to sustain itself, it needs to address those systems. An approach to teaching that empowers people, cultures, and systems. And then the next question is, what does it practice? What are the activities of transformative education? And it invites people to do, I'm going to name three. You could probably name a lot more than this, but these seem to be three very important ones. Deep self-inquiry, listening, and questioning. So we're inviting people and systems to do these three things. And then who are the recipients of a transformative education? We usually think of schools as places for students to learn, but they actually employ many adults, and they also serve parents. And if these students are not included in the process, its effects will be limited. So all learners includes teachers, parents, and students. And in the learning part, in what those teachers, parents are doing, there's the actual transformation. Who they are, which is their identity, and what they believe. At the end of the process, something different comes out. And finally, it's not enough to talk about transformation in the abstract, just transformation per se, because you can transform into anything. The Nazi Party of Germany, for example, was a transformative influence for millions of people. But that's not the kind of transformation we're looking for. So what goals do we actually have? And I think it's important, actually, for us as progressive educators. We love to think about process and talk about process as an open-ended thing. But it's important for us to be honest about the values that we actually adhere to and to speak them clearly. And the values in transformative education are awe and a sense of mystery, connected community, and continuity of life, including the ecological environment that gives us life. So to restate the whole definition, an approach to teaching that empowers people, cultures, and systems to invite deep self-inquiry, listening, and questioning, so that all learners, teachers, parents, students, continually reconsider who they are and what they believe toward a sense of awe, connected community, and continuity of life. That's what we came to. And this definition, I was thinking as I was preparing for this is what I've worked for most of my life to get to understand what it was I was looking for and what I want to contribute back as an educator to my students and the people that I work with. So I'd like to continue by talking a little bit more about that science of awe, which I think is really important for what we're trying to pursue in transformative education. And this research has been championed by the social scientist Dacher Keltner at Berkeley, whose recent book on the subject ties together findings from evolutionary biology, human behavior, physiology, and psychology. It's real science. And he and his colleagues defined awe as the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding of the world. That's transformative. He, in his research, which, by the way, was not confined to just small groups of university students, it really was cross-cultural. It drew from people's experiences all over the world from all kinds of different backgrounds. And what he found, first of all, was that these experiences are universal. They're happening all over the place. And he grouped them into these categories. The 8 wonders of life, he called them. They include other people's moral courage, kindness, strength, things that inspire us. A feeling of collective effervescence that we get when we're feeling a group connection, particularly in large groups like a large ceremony or event, like a sports event or a concert or something. And then some which may be more obvious, like being in nature or music or visual design even. Spirituality and religion bring about these experiences. Experiences of life and death, and epiphanies, moments where we have these deep realizations that suddenly change our perspective. And I think it's interesting that the first 2 of these are not anything particularly mystical. They're simply social. They're simply encountering other beings or being with other beings that fill us with a sense of awe, fill us with a sense of transcendence. The physical manifestations of awe that he explored are also common to cultures around the world. They include tears coming into the eyes, feeling chills, the hairs standing on your arms standing on their ends, and verbal expressions like whoa or ah, these sort of open-mouthed expressions are how people physically manifest awe in their lives. And this physicality gives it a reality, not just in our bodies, not just in our imaginations. And it indicates how powerful these experiences can be. They're physical experiences. So to illustrate what they look like, I put a couple of images here. The open-mouthed upward gaze, as if some grand revelation is descending from above. The wide open eyes, as we forget ourselves, we move out of ourselves and we become immersed in something magnificent. This is what awe looks like. And the effects of awe are also fascinating. It has these measurable effects on people. When they're placed before images of grandeur, like Yosemite Valley, they tend to draw themselves in smaller proportions. They engage in more generosity and helping behaviors. These are statistically significant effects in controlled experiments, and we can only imagine what happens when people feel these effects accumulated over time. Awe causes the release of oxytocin in our bodies and dopamine, and it activates the vagus nerve and parasympathetic nervous system. And these physiological effects do a lot to counter the stressful aspects of life. They're deeply healthy for us. So finally, I'll talk a little bit about how we try to practice transformative education at Trū. The micro school in Palo Alto that I co-founded 14 years ago. I can't possibly describe all the unique attributes of this school as we've engaged in this quest to create transformative learning experiences, but I will briefly tell you about how we use these three qualities: performance, language, and perspective taking. One of the defining features of Trū is its theater productions. For years, I've known how powerful the experience of stage performance is as a vehicle for learning, but the research on awe is giving me an even stronger justification. Performance is an awe-inspiring experience. It has that collective effervescence of finding oneself submerged in group experience, accomplishing something together that no individual could do alone. And the topics of the plays inspire moral amazement and courage. The music engages the feelings and the body in a way that words cannot. And the personal challenges that occur simultaneously for so many different students through these rehearsals and performances teach them to reach beyond their previous capabilities. It's fundamentally transformative. The excitement around these performances is palpable and long-lasting. As a vehicle for any kind of learning, they're highly valuable, but as a vehicle for transformative learning, I'm really tempted to call them essential. The language used at a school, the way things are called, the categories, how people are addressed, tells us so much about its fundamental attitudes and assumptions. We all have language that we've inherited from the past that we're trying to revise. The simple expressions that convey an attitude that we don't really feel or we don't really want to feel. For example, children will sometimes tell each other, "Don't get me in trouble with the teacher," meaning, please hide this information so that I can avoid feeling responsible for something. And at Trū, we work to revise these attitudes by changing the language used. No one's getting in trouble. We're simply solving a problem. We are returning to the ideals behind our community. This is the way we can describe what we're doing. It should be inclusive and empathetic. We should use words for what they mean and not something else. So, for example, to a child who says sorry as a way to end the conversation, I might say, "Are you really sorry? Don't say it if you don't feel it." Language can define our reality. And one of the school rules at Trū is choose happiness. That simple statement tells us something about happiness. This is something that we can choose. It's not just dependent on circumstances. It expands what's possible for us. So that use of language is changing our sense of what reality is. And a fundamental practice at Trū is the expansion of children's perspectives, which is the basis of any transformative experience. We know that we've changed when we see the world differently afterwards. And it might be through the eyes of another person, through whether that's someone we know or someone we meet only in the pages of history, or it might be by discovering a new interpretation of something we thought we already understood, or it might be a question that we never thought to ask before. Parker Palmer writes about resisting the temptation to treat the subjects of our study as something we control, the way we might speak of nature as the victim of humankind. The perspective we try to form in our students is that everyone and everything has its own perspective, its own reality and way of seeing the world. Einstein came upon some of his discoveries by imagining what it would be like to ride a wave of light. And in that visualization, He perceived something about some quality of the universe that no one had perceived before. In our upcoming play about the origins of the universe, we talk about the universe as this vast being engulfed in its own act of self-creation. And this kind of thinking causes students to feel bound up themselves in what they study. The act of learning becomes an act of love. So that ends my piece. I'm really ready to facilitate a discussion. And I composed a few questions for you all to consider in this discussion. And I'll give them all to you. I was thinking we would do breakout groups, but it looks like we are a breakout group right here. Um, the first question is, what was an experience that caused you to redefine your own identity or beliefs?
I can share one experience of when I was just finished my undergraduate degree. I went to Denmark and I got to spend some time in preschools over there and learn a little bit about culture and child development in Denmark. We were in Copenhagen. And I went to a preschool and got a chance to witness the way the teachers there were interacting with the children. And I had previously spent some time in a childcare facility and preschool here in the US where things were very different. And wow, it definitely shifted my view of what childhood can look like, and how our role and our position in being around children in this, and especially in those early years, can look different. And that was a pretty powerful experience for me.
Thank you. Manas.
Maybe I interpreted the question a bit differently. I interpreted it as something that I felt or saw that changed my sort of belief about like identity or the world. And so
That's,
like
no, you're right on.
so I remember I was some age between maybe 7 and 10 years old, and obviously I was growing up in India, and my parents and I used to take like a summer vacation every year. And one of the summers, like I'm from a state or a location where there are not that many tall mountains or not that many like big places. And mom and dad took me to this region of Himalaya, the northern part of India, where we had to trek on this mountain for 3 days. So like
Hmm.
every day we would walk like I guess like 5 or 10 kilometers, and then you would have a tent. You would stay overnight in the tent, and then you move on, and at the end of the third day, we were supposed to reach this temple at the top of the mountain where there is a ice, statue that naturally forms from the water droplets of Lord Shiva. And for me, the religious part did not click, but like just me being this small child walking in this huge mountain, like no people around me anywhere, staying overnight in like these few tents felt so different than, I mean, India is so densely populated, right? Even in my small city of like 500,000 people, everything is tightly packed. Like you feel small in a different way. And being in those mountains made me feel small in a very different way at that age. And I was like, oh my gosh, the world seems so different and so big compared to like what I've seen so far. That's the, I'm sure maybe there are other memories, but this
Hmm.
one I can remember clearly, like feeling a sense of the world which felt very different than
That
what I had seen before.
is very vivid.
Yeah, I remember it still now. I mean, at 45, 46, 45, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can feel those feelings of like, oh my gosh, wow.
Yeah. So when you talked about awe, and maybe it was in the last session or even today, like the memories that come to me immediately are these ones.
Yeah. And experiences when we're young. I mean, I don't know if there's any research on this in particular, but my impression of children is that they're having those experiences much more frequently than adults. They kind of live in a state of awe, especially when they're very young. You know, like 4 or 5 years old, you just look at their faces and they're just like, they have that expression all the time. Like, whoa, all this stuff is coming into me.
On that note, you made me think about one of our students who's 4 years old and teaches Camden and I a lot about awe.
Mhm.
Every time we go outside, his awareness and joy in hearing sounds and observing things that we would never notice is incredible. I mean, for sure, we're in awe of him.
Yeah.
But yes, it's little things that we would take for granted constantly. It's that expression that you described is just there.
Anyone else?
Well, my thoughts went to a similar way to what Andrea was speaking about. I was remembering when I was an adolescent, I did a lot of babysitting for neighborhood children, and I observed and noticed parents and adults. It was surprising to me that even at the age of like 13 or 14, I could tell that there was a right way and a wrong way to deal with little people. And I think about that now, and that was pretty remarkable for a 13-year-old. So like,
Mhm.
there's a much better way to do that. There's
Hmm.
a much better way to handle a difficult child.
I was thinking about moving to this country and living at a yoga community for the first year that I was here, and just being so taken out of, and I had just graduated high school, but being taken out of everything that I was familiar with, and now living in this completely different way. Different people, different language, different food, different, and then in a yoga community, so that was sort of altogether different as well. But it also, I think, because it was so such a difference, I learned a lot about who I was. Like, even though I was alive already for all this time, but I was never having to confront so strongly of what are the things that I care about? What are my fears? What are the things that help me? I was terribly homesick, and what did that mean to be feeling at home, and how could I cultivate that for myself? So there was a lot of um, learning about who I am, and my identity, I guess, I think was formed.
Yeah, that kind of like what Manas was saying, that experience of being in a totally different place can be so valuable in reflecting back on you. You know, you're the only common thing between where you were and where you are now, and so all these things have changed around you, and then you sort of say, but who am I in the midst of all of this? Phil, I think you're muted.
If I were to turn around and look over these years, there are many events, but probably the most dramatic happened in rapid succession. Um, when I was in my 20s and enrolled my children in the Montessori school and stood frozen in the doorway, knowing that something magical was happening, but not having a word for it, and becoming good friends with the teachers and them sharing a book with me that I was reading, And I was at the time working for a military aircraft company as an engineer. And I was driving home from work, and I just pulled over on the side of the road. I couldn't drive anymore from what I had read in the book, and thinking, oh my God. And a few months later, I kind of half-heartedly mentioned to one of the teachers at the school that someday I might want to be a Montessori teacher. And he said, why not now? And this visceral waxing went throughout my body, and I just started laughing. And 2 months later, I was in Italy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big moment.
Hmm.
What was the book?
Well, it was one of Montessori's books. I think it was
Okay.
Secret of Childhood. It was
Yeah, okay.
for parents.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. My second question is, Anton, I don't know if you're here to join the conversation or just listen, but feel free to jump in. Um,
Sorry, I'm driving. I'm just listening for this
okay,
time.
no problem. Let's see. Sorry, I'm looking for my slide deck here. The next question is, what were the conditions that led to these experiences? What do you notice in the conditions leading up to those experiences that really caused you to have that shift?
Well, I'll go very quickly because it's the same in every one of them. There's an energy, an unknown energy that I feel in my back pushing. That's all I can say.
So that's what you feel during the experience, right?
Oh, before.
Before the experience. So in the one that you described, that's the feeling that you had
When I walked into that classroom.
when you walked into the classroom. So you knew that something was happening at that point. Yeah. So as far as so for you, it feels like something that's very internal. It's like there aren't really any
There's no
conditions making it
choice.
happen.
They're choiceless choices.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess I would say that I was encouraged as a child to try new things. I was never encouraged to. I mean, my parents had moved me to a Waldorf school, which was like they helped start it. It was very out of the box. Nobody else in my town went to Waldorf school, and so I guess they modeled it for me too, to try different things, to follow your interests, to follow what feels, sort of like the stomach feeling of like, yeah, this seems right. I want something different and more, um, and um, and to be brave. I think to not shy away from what other people may say or from how hard it may be, but to make something happen.
Yeah, so I think I just investigated, and I'm pretty sure for me the consistent feeling is confusion before these experiences. So somehow being lost, like all of a sudden, like I'm just disoriented, like I don't know what wait, and the and it's just this like bumbling sensation, and then being almost engulfed by that sense of awe. But it does maybe seem like confusion is out front for me.
Yeah. What produces, if you step back from that, what produces the confusion? Are you encountering something new, or is it like Phil, does it just sort of come upon you unexpectedly?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it's something new, or just like something about the moment that like is crisp. Like
Mhm.
it's like there's like a beckoning of uh this convergence of different emotions or experiences or senses all kind of like packaged into like a little ball, and just like presented in a way that maybe it's like a new way, and then that is maybe like disorienting afterwards. Or
Yeah. Any other conditions that people can think of that have produced them?
Well, I just want to go back because it isn't that. I think there's a undefined stream that runs through my life, or most people's lives, that is this allurement, that's this attraction. And so it isn't as if it just popped in out of the blue. It was pregnant. There were conditions had been met in my life or in a previous life for that to be pregnant.
But the way you're describing it, it still sounds like something internal, something inside you.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, may be important for us to recognize. I mean, that's why I settled on this idea of the desire for transformative education. It's not really something you can impose. And I often talk about that when people are looking at the school. I say, look, our mission is to make children's learning a transformative experience. But we can't, it's not like we can sort of guarantee a process that will make that happen for them. All we can do is lay the groundwork and make it possible for them, and expect that somehow their own guidance to experience something transformative will come to the surface if we allow it to. I feel like a lot of school, of course, suppresses that. They're asking children to conform to a lot of things to do with that. But at least if you remove the obstacles, it's more likely to happen.
So I'm thinking about, there's certain conditions within ourselves that meet certain external conditions. And what I kind of thought I heard in some of our descriptions of our experiences was there was some novelty in the experience that we came into, whether it was a new living situation, a new landscape, a new experience being around children, or observing a different environment for children. And so something about the external is there that meets some kind of composure of the internal, where there's some level of openness or curiosity or readiness, or even maybe something that feels lost or misconstrued beforehand now somehow meets these circumstances, and awe blossoms in these meeting of these two.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Andrea, about my own feelings here, that there were questions that I knew had to have had answers. There was a search. There were questions and a deliberate search, hoping that there were answers, not knowing if they were going to be found, but nonetheless, you felt like you would come upon them. I'm talking in an abstract way, and it sometimes like throws me.
That's
Like
okay.
answers to questions you didn't know you had.
So my third question is, how can we, if our desire is to cultivate these experiences, to embrace them, to not make them happen, but make them possible or more likely to happen, how can we go about creating those conditions for ourselves and for others? And as educators, of course, we're thinking about our communities.
Maybe I can go first and offer my perspective.
Yes, please.
For me, I always find going to nature very awe-inspiring. And so, like, for me, the simple answer is to go to nature. And it's somewhat readily accessible, maybe not as readily as it should be. And it doesn't require any special effort, except maybe shoes and a jacket.
Yeah, you're right. It's a simple one. It's easy in a way. Nature's right there all the time, maybe more
And
present.
there are all kinds of things happening from micro to macro
Yes.
uh, in that environment if we have the time and the patience and the stillness to observe.
Yeah. Well, I certainly see that with children. It's like nature comes to them in the form of, this one little weed that's growing out of the ground, and they start pulling it apart and doing something with it, and they become fascinated for half an hour. Um, they really are attuned to that. I think for the rest of us, it requires a little bit more of a overt commitment. Like I'm going to get out of the city and go into the woods. And then we start to feel it. And even then, it takes time, right? You carry yourself with you, and you have to sort of stop stewing over things and actually pay attention to what's going on. But this is what John Muir is a character that we love to celebrate at Trū. We did a play about him a couple of years ago, or just last year, and this is what he was talking about all the time. He was like, just get out there and see the majesty of what's going on around you. This is how you will solve all your problems. This is how you will cure every illness. It became his religion. He had this very fundamentalist Scottish religious upbringing, which he never completely abandoned, but it definitely changed eventually. And he talked really about um, nature became his temple, his religion.
I
I feel
think
like
there's
I just
also,
want that. Go ahead, Julia. Go ahead.
sorry, I didn't mean to. I was just thinking that, and I mean, something that I think that comes in nature that I try to cultivate for sure also in the classroom is a sense of calmness and a sense of presence. And, I do that through the mindfulness practice, but even, I mean, sometimes they're doing their writer studio and you could hear the pin drop just because of, you know, the calm presence that we created, but also sort of the more open-ended time space. It sometimes kind of almost horrifies me to hear of schools who just kind of move in 40-minute increments, and it's like, and you're wondering, why your children are more restless and have anxiety and all of these things because, but sort of this the schedule, but also the voice that I use um, and just helping children to feel good about who they are and connecting with the activity in an authentic way that they can relax about what they're doing and feel good with what the work that they're doing, feel inspired. So I think that sort of taking nature the calmness that you get in nature, I think, is automatically trying to create that also in the classroom.
I have a question. May I interrupt and jump in? So like the openness and not like having unstructured time, it's like it makes sense to me. But looking back into I just understood like many of those experiences to me came actually from the like desire for a different outcome, like a thirst, like pushing myself out of the comfort zone, and
Mhm.
that's kind of a in in conflict with like being calm, with uh, like how to reconcile those two things.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said comfort zone because I was thinking of that earlier. I think a lot of the experiences people described um, were about that, going into an environment which kind of challenged you in some way. I think for Phil, it was the walking into a classroom where he didn't feel like he had any expertise, but he had this huge desire to connect. And for Manas, it was the temple in the high mountains, and for Yulia, it was the new country, new yoga community. These are all places that kind of pushed our boundaries, forced us into a place of unfamiliarity. So I do think that's important. I think that's where the big transcendent things might happen. Whereas the calmness, I think the calmness is less about calmness per se and more about presence. It's more about presence and the time given to something. You're not going to um, I feel like it's less likely that you're going to have something profound happen to you if you're constantly preoccupied with the next thing on the schedule. It keeps your mind. I remember this educator once at a conference talked about two conceptions of time using Greek words, and there was kairos and chronos. And kairos is the idea of cyclical time. It's in the word gyroscope or gyroscope, and it's the idea that everything comes back to the beginning and it just continually repeats itself. Whereas chronos is the idea of chronological time, of sequential, linear, where, once this moment is past, it never returns. We're on to something totally new, and there's this endless progression into the future. And when we're preoccupied with chronos, we um, we can't have those experiences of immersion, those experiences of letting the self go and letting our agenda go and just being, just being. Whereas when we do have those experiences, we're experiencing kairos. We're in this space where it's timeless. It's like we could do this as long as we want to. And I think that's what Yuli is describing in the calm classroom space, where there's no immediate. I mean, obviously it's not 40 minutes, but it's maybe an hour or maybe 40, maybe maybe 90 minutes. There's still an end to it, but for children, it becomes an open space for them to experience, and they're not being rushed. And for adults, we have to give ourselves those experiences, at least in this society. Um, there's no way that life is going to immediately hand it to us unless we get sick or something and we have to stay in bed for a week, right? We have those moments sometimes, but in normal life, we're constantly being dictated by the clocks and the schedules.
And Theodore, I also would add that it's not always that the children are just sitting there doing peacefully their work, because sometimes there is discomfort and there is like the challenge and there is the having to grapple with something and being uncomfortable. But I actually have the time and the space to walk them through it and to go through it with them. It's not a rush situation where I then have to say, okay, well, let's just get this done and then we'll deal with that all later. But there is actually that time to sometimes be uncomfortable, and that's okay. And that's a good thing sometimes to work through.
That's so true. Actually, I didn't even think of that. I mean, it sounds so idyllic, right? Children sitting for this endless amount of time just writing their stories. It's so easy, right? As a teacher, you know it's not easy. Some of those children are done after 5 minutes, and you're telling them they have to continue to sit there and continue to think and allow their story to evolve. And that is uncomfortable. You're right. How's that, Anton?
Yeah, yeah, I'm hearing. Thank you.
Anton's son is in our school, in Yulia's classroom.
I was actually thinking of him.
So, any other thoughts about creating the conditions for transformative education? Or just thoughts in general about what I presented?
Yeah, one thing that was coming to mind, I just had to rerun my brain a little bit there, rejog my memory. Yeah, so I was thinking about, right, the first that came up was like authenticity, right? And this idea of being just myself in my flow state of, where that just that freedom in myself. But then also, then I think that's more on like the communicating aspect and finding this place. But then on the other side, yeah, I was thinking of like silence and stillness. I think more of kind of like what Julia was saying, the answer there, that I think a lot of the awe has come from those moments too. So a little of both, it's, but definitely less from when I'm speaking. I think it's like, I'm actually like recognizing that now, like I definitely have less moments of awe when I'm the one talking and saying stuff and like using my voice rather than like just listening and absorbing or taking in.
Yeah.
I was thinking a lot about nature as well, and what you said about John Muir really sunk in. It's like, yes, just go outside. Is it really just that easy? um, and so that kind of brought me down a train of thought of, well, is it just about bringing children to places where they have opportunities to experience awe? But then thinking back to, our first question about our experiences of awe, and we were talking about how there's something within us. And so it's not just about the external of what we're showing children, but how are we creating the conditions within children, and what we've been talking about with presence and enough time. There's something there, and I think about the child in a moment when there's a potential for awe to be happening. What qualities within them are what's happening within them that they get that experience of awe? And now what Camden's saying about, well, there's a certain aspect of listening, of witnessing. So how can we cultivate that? How can we help children to become more present?
Yes.
And I mean, and one maybe answering the question for myself sometimes is, how can I find myself moving towards places of awe where I don't feel like I'm the one who's constantly looking at the time, but I'm taking the time to give myself experiences of awe, so that at least the children can witness that. Is that one way that we can help them move towards a place of being present and witnessing, and help them when those opportunities for awe arise, they get that experience.
Yeah. I think that's a great point about it really does have to come from within. But with children, you really can help them develop those capacities in themselves. Just like with everything else that we're teaching children, we can teach children how to find that calm space, that presence in themselves. And it takes some doing. I mean, some children, we've probably all seen groups of children, they go to this place that should be inspiring awe, and they're just basically tearing it apart, right? Because they're not present. Um, and so we think, well, that was a waste of time. But it's really about that preparation. And I think at Trū, that's like a constant theme of every day. How are we preparing children, both, on the short term for what we're going to do in 10 minutes, and in the long term for how we want them to experience this whole year and their whole lives. Um, and to talk about those qualities and get them to think about it, because they're intelligent. And once they're working with us, it's not that hard. Once they understand what we're aiming for, I see this when we teach children mindfulness practices. It's not easy for them to sit still at first, but once they experience one moment of real calm stillness, and then they open their eyes and they feel so much more at peace, and they see things so much more clearly, they don't forget that feeling. And then they want to have it back a next time. And so then they start to ask for it. They say, can we do mindfulness?
Being older, I find, where do I go to regenerate? Was the question, I guess. And
Mm.
of course, but I had to find my library. I had, with the right books, with the right authors, with the right people to speak with, to talk to. Um, and if students can find their way that way, one thing will just lead to another, hopefully, and another and another. That makes sense.
Yes. No, I think you're right. Repeated experience is very important for young children, of course. The first time around may be a failure, but the second time you go, they get it, and you need to give it that time for the idea to gel. That's what we do with our forest school. So every month we go to the same park and preserve and do activities there. And the first time we went, it was kind of a little chaotic and everybody was trying to figure out what to do. But over time, there's become a routine and the children really look forward to it and they know what to expect. And so then it becomes much easier for them to have that experience.
May I ask a quick question? I think you said you were associated with Transformative Learning Foundation.
No, wait, they were, that was the graduate program, right?
Well, I thought I heard you say that.
I'm part of a group called the Transformative Education Network, which is sort of a loosely organized group of colleagues in the Bay Area here.
All right. Okay. Different group.
Different group, but I'm familiar with the Transformative Learning Foundation. Well, thank you all for engaging in this discussion with me.
Thank you, Theodore. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone who joined today as well. Manas and Anton also for joining for the first time. It's wonderful to have you all. We'll have some more discussions every 2 weeks coming up. And so hope to see you all again soon. Again, thank you so much, Theodore.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you
Take
for
care.
hosting.
Thank you.